Two captains, two warnings, two moments where a very experienced man looked at a piece of paper that essentially said, "You are going to die if you keep doing what you are doing," and thought, "This does not apply to me." The Titanic struck an iceberg that 6 different ships had warned about. The Lusitania sailed into a torpedo that the German government had literally advertised in the morning paper. Both men got a lot of people killed. The only real question is which one made the worse call. Welcome to the matchup nobody asked for, but everybody secretly wants settled. Captain Edward Smith of the Titanic versus Captain William Thomas Turner of the Lusitania. 3 rounds, 1 verdict. No lift boats. Let's meet our contestants. Edward Smith, 62 years old, 43 years at sea, the highest paid captain in the White Star Line fleet, so trusted by the wealthy that they refused to sail without him. His nickname was the Millionaire's Captain. The Titanic's maiden voyage was supposed to be his final crossing before retirement, his last ride, the world's biggest ship. What could go wrong? William Thomas Turner, 58 years old, 30 years of Atlantic crossings under his belt, a Cunard veteran known for being stubborn, competent, and not particularly interested in what anyone at the Admiralty had to say. The kind of man who would argue with the ocean if it disagreed with him. 2 captains in their late 50s and early 60s. Between them, over 70 years of combined experience on the Atlantic. One of them went down with his ship and became a legend. The other survived and was blamed for everything. Let us find out who actually deserved it. Round 1. The warnings. Captain Edward Smith received 6 ice warnings on April 14, 1912. 6. The last one came from the Mesaba, describing a massive field of ice directly in the Titanic's path. That message never reached the bridge because the wireless operators were busy sending passenger telegrams. Rich people's dinner plans literally blocked a life or death warning. But even the warnings Smith did see did not change his speed. He steamed at 22 knots, full ahead, trusting the standard practice of the time, maintain course, and rely on the lookouts. That sounds reasonable until you remember the lookouts did not have binoculars. The binoculars had been misplaced back in Southampton when a last-minute officer reshuffle meant the key to the binocular locker left the ship with the officer who had been reassigned. So the entire lookout plan for the largest moving object ever built was 2 men squinting into the darkness of the North Atlantic. Brilliant. Turner's situation was different, but arguably worse. The Admiralty sent him a warning that submarine activity had been reported near the southern Irish coast, exactly where he was headed. He also knew that 2 ships had been sunk in those waters in the previous 48 hours. And here is a detail that makes this even more uncomfortable. Before the Lusitania left New York, the Imperial German Embassy published a warning in American newspapers, right next to the Cunard sailing advertisement, stating that vessels entering the war zone around the British Isles did so at their own risk. The passengers saw it. Turner saw it. Everybody knew. Turner reduced speed from 21 knots to 15. Not because he was being cautious, but because he wanted to time his arrival with the tide at Liverpool. He also sailed in a straight line instead of zigzagging, which was the recommended evasive maneuver. His reasoning was that zigzagging made a ship a bigger target. Most naval experts disagreed. Kapitän Lieutenant Walter Schwieger of U-20 certainly disagreed, because at 2:10 in the afternoon on May 7, 1915, he put a single torpedo into the Lusitania's starboard side. Now, who ignored warnings worse? Smith did not even process all of his. Turner processed his and made a tactical choice that turned out to be catastrophically wrong. Smith was careless. Turner was calculated. Both got the same result. But if you had to pick who had less excuse, it is Turner. He knew submarines were there. He chose a straight line anyway. Round 2. Everything falls apart. The Titanic struck the iceberg at 11:40 on April 14th. Smith had 2 hours and 40 minutes before the ship sank. That is a long time to organize an evacuation, and yet it was a disaster. Lifeboat 7 launched with 28 people in a boat built for 65. Half the lifeboats left half empty because crew members did not believe the ship was actually sinking, and passengers in first class initially refused to leave the warm lounge for a dark, cold lifeboat. The logic was incredible. Why would I get into a tiny wooden boat in the freezing Atlantic when I am standing in a heated room on an unsinkable ship? It made perfect sense until it did not. Nobody had run a proper drill. Nobody had a clear chain of command. The ship's band kept playing on the boat deck as the water rose, which is either the most heroic or the most surreal detail in maritime history, depending on how you look at it. Smith gave orders. Some were followed. Many were not. He was last seen on the bridge. Whether that was leadership or paralysis, nobody knows. Turner's disaster was faster and more brutal. A torpedo hit, and then a second internal explosion ripped through the ship. The cause of that second explosion is still debated by historians and engineers to this day. The Lusitania listed so sharply to starboard that the lifeboats on the port side could not be launched at all. Of 48 lifeboats and collapsible boats on board, 6 made it into the water successfully. 6. The ship sank in 18 minutes. 18. The survivors who made it into the water were eventually picked up by fishing boats and rescue vessels from Kinsale and Queenstown, some clinging to wreckage for hours in the cold Irish Sea. Smith had 2 hours and 40 minutes and still could not fill his lifeboats. Turner had 18 minutes, which is barely enough time to understand what is happening, let alone save anyone. Turner survived. He was pulled from the water, clinging to a chair. Smith went down with the Titanic and became immortal. Round 3. This is where the humor stops. The Titanic took 1,517 people. The Lusitania took 1,198. Among the Lusitania's dead were 128 American citizens, 94 children, and 35 infants. The Titanic's dead were disproportionately third-class passengers and crew, people who were never given a real chance to reach the boat deck. Many of them found the gates to the upper decks locked or blocked, a detail that gets more horrifying the longer you think about it. The Lusitania's dead were everyone. The ship went down so fast that class and money and cabin location barely mattered. In one case, the system failed the vulnerable. In the other, 18 minutes erased all systems entirely. Smith made the worst call, and I know that might surprise you because Turner sailed into a known submarine zone in a straight line. That is a serious failure, but consider the full picture. Smith sailed a brand new ship carrying over 2,200 people at full speed into a known ice field. At night, with no binoculars for the lookouts, no full lifeboat drill completed, and not enough lifeboat seats for everyone on board. Every layer of safety that should have existed either was not there or did not work, and Smith, the most experienced captain in the fleet, treated the crossing like a routine Tuesday. Turner was arrogant in a war zone, where danger is at least expected. Smith was arrogant in peace, when he had every resource, every warning, and no enemy forcing his hand. Arrogance in peace is the worst call. It always is. One more thing, Turner survived the sinking, survived the Board of Trade inquiry, and survived the Admiralty's very public attempt to blame him for everything. Some historians now believe the Admiralty deliberately withheld escort ships and used Turner as a scapegoat to cover their own failures. Turner never recovered his reputation. He spent his remaining years in quiet retirement and died in 1933, largely forgotten by the public. Smith, meanwhile, became a movie character played by multiple actors across a century of film, most recently by Bernard Hill in the 1997 James Cameron version that made $1 billion. One captain is remembered with sympathy, the other is not remembered at all. Strange how history decides who gets a statue and who gets erased. So, 2 captains, 2 legends, 2 catastrophic decisions, 1 verdict. Do you agree, or did Turner deserve worse? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to see who was the bigger disaster between Napoleon's invasion of Russia and Hitler's invasion of Russia, that's the next one. I'll see you there.